Daniel Sports Central, we go over our next schedule preview this offseason, and it's going to be over the Oregon Ducks, one of the top teams in the Pac-12 in the 2022 season, as this team went 10-3 overall. This team was very much a contender down the stretch. They took two brutal losses in their last three games of the regular season, which ended their playoff hopes in the end. But how will this team be in 2023, and why I think this team could potentially be a big national contender in the 2023 season is what we'll be talking about here today. We'll be going over the players that this team will be losing, who they'll be returning, and previewing their schedule for the first time this offseason. Let's get started with a quick recap of 2022. This team was once again 10-3 in 2022, lost to Georgia in week 1, 49-3. This was a terrible loss. I mean, they just looked bad in week 1. This team's expectations really plummeted after that loss in week 1. But this team really responded to that loss well. They beat Eastern Washington 70-14 the next week, completely destroyed them. Beat BYU 41-20, which BYU, by the way, heading into the season, they actually had some high expectations. That was an impressive win there. They beat Washington State on the road, beat Stanford, beat Arizona. After their bye, came back and beat UCLA, who was a solid team in 2022. They beat Cal on the road, took care of Colorado 49-10. And then they had their brutal loss to Washington. This was a home game. Oregon had to win this game to keep their playoff hopes alive. I mean, I think if this team would have won out, I mean, they definitely should have been in the playoff. I know they lost to Georgia 49-3. That was in week 1. And so this team, if they could have won out, I think they would have very much been in the college football playoff. But lost the Huskies 37-34, a close, brutal loss there. Beat Utah the next week 20-17. And then lost to Oregon State in a game that they should have won. But Oregon State stormed back into that game and stole a win from them. 38-34 was the final. And this team, so heading into the Holiday Bowl, I mean, with a 9-3 record, kind of a disappointing last few games, a disappointing November. They came out and played well against North Carolina and got the win 28-27. So 10-3, the final record. This team obviously had expectations to make the playoff in 2022. But this team's chances, just based on the returning production heading into 2023, are way higher. I mean, this team is very much one that I could see being a big contender for the majority of the season. Granted, they don't take any close losses down the stretch like they did in 2022. They returned the standout quarterback in Bo Nix. Bo Nix, the Auburn transfer, had a really good 2022 season. This was his best season of his college career, putting up 3,500 yards, nearly 3,600, along with 29 touchdowns over 7 interceptions, and a 72% completion rate. You compare that completion rate with his 2019 season, his freshman year, he had a 57% completion rate in 2019. That is really improved over the years, and this was far and away. You look at touchdowns, you look at yardage, it was definitely his best season. So Bo Nix is on the rise as we look forward to 2023. Bucky Irving's coming back. Noah Whittington's coming back as well. I mean, so this team really shows potential in the backfield. I mean, this offense in general just looks great. You got Troy Franklin coming back. You do lose Chase Cota, your second receiver, but you got Chris Hudson coming back. Same with Terrence Ferguson, who was your top tight end, your fourth in receiving this past year. So offensively, there's a lot to like about this team. You look at the backfield, I mean, Irving put up nearly 1,400 yards this past season, 8 touchdowns. Whittington not far behind, right around 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. Bo Nix himself rushed for over 500 yards this past season and 15 touchdowns. So this offense should definitely be one of the best in the country. It's just about the defense, whether or not this defense should be good. And I expect it to. I mean, this team does return a lot of their talent. They lose one on the defensive line, 2 linebackers, as well as 2 in the secondary. So there's a couple losses, but overall I'm not terribly concerned about this defense. So all signs point, as far as returning production goes, to this team being a big contender. I mean, you lose Noah Sewell in the linebacking situation. Christian Gonzalez is also gone in the secondary, but otherwise I'm really not too concerned. So I mean, this team has got excellent returning production. Is this team a dark horse national contender in 2023? I very much think so. I think the Ducks, I mean, the Pac-12 is it's a brutal conference. It's like, if there's a good comparison, it's like the Big Ten in basketball. I mean, the conference just eats itself up, and it's a brutal conference because you got plenty of good teams at the top, but you don't have a major standout team. So, I mean, these teams just beat themselves up. And like in the Pac-12 this past season, you had 6 teams that were ranked for the majority of the season, but none of them made it to the college football playoff in the end, just because it's so competitive at the top. And so for Oregon, I mean, that's the thing. The Pac-12 is such a competitive conference, and I expect it to be the exact same way in 2023. So you got to make sure you close out your games and make sure that you don't suffer any close losses, because any loss is brutal when you're in the Pac-12. But looking at your transfer portal and recruiting now going to next season, Jay Butterfield, backup quarterback, he's gone. Sean Dollars, one of the running backs in the backfield, is gone, but he didn't have a major impact on this team. Trayshawn Holden, receivers coming in from Alabama. You also add Keontae Johnson from Troy to the receiving core. You lose Dante Thornton, really didn't have a major impact, but he's off to Tennessee. Cornelius, offensive tackle, coming in from Rhode Island. And you also got Angelau coming in from Texas for the offensive line. Edge rusher Jordan Birch is coming in from South Carolina as well. So you had multiple key players who could have an immediate impact for this team. Braden Swinson is off to LSU, edge rusher. Justin Flo is off to Arizona. Linebacker Justin Jacobs is coming in from Iowa. You bring in Connor Sewell from Arizona State. Linebacker Jackson LeDuc is off to Nevada. Kyrie Jackson, defensive back, is coming in from Alabama. You also got Tysheem Johnson, safety, coming in from Ole Miss, and Justin Flo, safety, is in the transfer portal. So this team has been very active in the transfer portal. It's only February, so that's something to keep in mind. Recruiting-wise, this team is 8th in the country, first in the Pac-12, the top team in the Pac-12 here. They got 1 5-star and 19 4-stars coming in. So recruiting is overall excellent for the Ducks. And this team I've got at a 9 out of 10 on the future forecast meter. This is how we see how bright the future looks for the teams. I think for Oregon, this team has very much got a bright future based on the recruiting, the returning production, and everything. I'd say the future definitely looks good for the Ducks. But looking at your schedule now, going into 2023, you got Portland State, an easy matchup in week 1. Texas Tech on the road in week 2. This is a game you got to really pay attention to. You do not want to be sleeping on Texas Tech here. This is a team that is on the rise. They very much exceeded expectations in 2022. I could see them being just as much of a contender in 2023, and you're going on the road during week 2. That's kind of a game that I could see being a trap game. So you got to pay attention to that one. You don't want to be losing to Texas Tech, because that could be very brutal to this team's chances of making the college football playoff if they lost that game. So that's a huge one. Then you got Hawaii in week 3. Colorado comes to town in week 4, and then Stanford on the road in week 5. You get your bye week, and then Washington on the road, which is a crucial matchup against the Huskies on the road. Got to beat them. Washington State at home, and then Utah on the road. So October, you only got 3 games, but each of those games is very important. And then you got Cal on November 4th, USC at home, which they should be very much a big contender. You got Arizona State on the road, and then Oregon State at home to finish out the regular season. So it's a really intriguing schedule. I mean, you got several crucial games, especially in the first half of the season. I mean, last year it was those 2 games towards the end of the season, which came back to bite. But this team is, I mean, we're going to know whether this team is a contender, say, by late October. But looking at September here, Portland State, take care of them. Texas Tech, I'm going to put that game in yellow for sure. I think Texas Tech, I mean, the spread on that game could be, I'm not going to say it's going to be favoring Texas Tech, but it's probably only going to be Oregon by 2 or 3, because Texas Tech is very much a team that's pretty dangerous. I mean, I think even in the Big 12, I could see them upsetting a couple of contenders in that conference in 2023. I don't see Texas Tech making it to the conference championship or winning any titles, but I see them as a dark horse team that could definitely pull some upsets, including over Oregon here. But I do want to favor Oregon right now in that matchup. Hawaii, Colorado, Stanford, all games you should be winning. I mean, Stanford on the road, I consider putting in yellow. I think Colorado's hype is overdone. I don't expect them to be a big contender. But then Stanford on the road, it's a road game, but it's also Stanford. You should take care of them, no problem. So your ceiling's 5-0, and your floor is 4-1 heading into October. October, which is a very significant month. You got Washington on October 14th. I'm actually going to favor the Huskies there. I mean, talent-wise, I think I like Oregon better, but Washington is in a similar situation to the Ducks here, because that's a team that was very much a contender in 2022, and they've got excellent returning production. Looking forward to 2023. That game is also in Seattle. I mean, I'm going to favor the Huskies right now in that matchup, especially considering we did see the Huskies beat Oregon in 2022 towards the end of the season. So I'm going to favor the Huskies there. I like Michael Penix in that team, but it's obviously so far out, it's tough to predict. But Washington State and Utah, I do want to favor you in both those matchups. Utah on the road could be a tricky one. But I think Utah, I mean, they got Cam Rising coming back. But, I mean, if their season to win something was in 2022, I mean, they could still be good in 2023. I just don't know if they're going to be a major contender in the 2023 season like I would have expected for them heading into 2022. But your ceiling is 8-0 heading to November. Floor is 6-2. That's the worst you could possibly be. And November is a huge month, especially in your last couple of games here. USC is a huge one. I've actually got you favored against USC. I think the Trojans probably are going to be my preseason favorite to win the conference. I really like Caleb Williams, Lincoln Riley. That team they completely were turned around in 2022. They were just 4-8 in 2021, and then I think they were 11-3, and they were a major contender in 2022. So I see USC with Caleb Williams being right back up there as a big national contender, but I do want to favor Oregon in that matchup right now, being at home there on November 11th. And then Arizona State, Oregon State, both close games. I'll favor you in both. Arizona State being on the road could be tricky. Oregon State at home. I mean, Oregon State really snuck up on Oregon this past season, but I do want to favor you with it being at home this season. But your ceiling is 12-0 for this season. Floor is 9-3. Once again, I see this team very much being a contender. I think the worst they could possibly be is 9-3. I mean, there's no excuse for this team to be worse than 9-3. But I'd say 11 wins is a really good projection for this team. I mean, the Pac-12 in 2022 had 6 teams or so that were all really good. I think this upcoming season, you got Washington, you got USC, you got Oregon. Utah's maybe a fringe team in the Pac-12, but especially the big three I do expect to be USC, Oregon, and Washington. I think UCLA falls off a bit. But it's a really intriguing conference, really interesting conference to predict. But in the end, let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this team. And I appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.